think you are now ready. Ready to hear what happened 100 years ago.
Sometimes a game can leave you with many questions. This can be down to the game developers wishing to give the player a certain feel or atmosphere during the game. In Breath of the Wild, I really think this was the case, where the game was more about exploring a massive world than weighing you down with story. But where Breath of the Wild sprinkles story for those to find it, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity makes it one of its biggest aspects, giving players who wanted to know more about what happened 100 years before Breath of the Wild the chance to find out those answers. For returning fans of Hyrule Warriors, there is a lot to appreciate here. Age of Calamity decided to mix the separate modes of Hyrule Warriors, the story and the adventure map modes, into one massive experience. Like Breath of the Wild, you are given a giant map filled with objectives to complete. Each time you complete a set goal, more are added to the map. This is a brilliant idea that gives a more complete experience and connected feel to the objectives, so it always feels you are working towards a final goal rather than grinding. But the main appeal to a game like this is the battles, massive multi-enemy wars across a sprawling map with familiar enemies from the world of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Stages are filled with hundreds of enemies to battle, as you choose to take arms as several playable characters, including the obvious choices like Zelda and Link, but also the champions and other standout characters from Zelda Breath of the Wild. Fans of Breath of the Wild will not be disappointed with the amount of callbacks to the Zelda epic, as you revisit locations and witness firsthand some of the massive struggles Link and the heroes faced leading up to the events of Breath of the Wild itself. It truly feels like a war is happening across the land of Hyrule, and this time you are not too late to the party. And battling is very easy. For anyone who doesn't know, borrowing from the popular Dynasty Warriors games, Hyrule Warriors isn't about battling every enemy as if they are your equal, rather controlling the waves of enemy numbers at key points of the map, cutting off their spawn points so they don't swarm the map and capture your base and defeat your fellow warriors. As you look at the map and see it filled with red, you run into battle and wipe them out to turn more of the map blue. So in a way, they're more warning you your bucket is getting full and you need to go there and pour out some of the water. So as a result of this, the smaller enemies are no match for you. You will cut through them with ease, as you swap between combinations of light and heavy attacks to best choose the combo which will dispatch the peons as quickly as possible. Only the large boss and mini boss enemies pose a large enough threat to you. These enemies strike harder and take much more damage to defeat, following attack patterns and with different strengths and tactics to topple them, often leading to some very cool cutscene special attacks. One of the most pleasing additions to the battles over the original Hyrule Warriors is perhaps the use of the Sheikah Plate, where certain bosses' attacks will show a symbol above their head when attempting to strike. If you hit the enemy with the correct Sheikah Ruin, it will topple the enemy, interrupting their attack and giving you a chance to deal massive damage. This of course is similar to the sub-items from Hyrule Warriors 1, but because you have access to all the Sheikah Ruins at the same time, adds a quick time event style counter system, testing your reflexes to mix up the pace. Age of Calamity has really done a good job incorporating the world of Breath of the Wild. Even the dodge mechanic has made it into the game, where sidestepping attacks at the last moment will slow time and deal massive damage, and although nowhere near in depth, materials can be collected from enemies to craft weapons and meals for stat boosts and bonuses, just like Breath of the Wild. But what was the real appeal for me was the aspects that Breath of the Wild only touched on in its story, and for the most part Age of Calamity does a great job. You get to spend more time with the champions and characters from the popular Zelda game, seeing how they interact with others, expanding on their characteristics, why all of these champions were respected warriors, and how Zelda united them all. Even the divine beasts, the colossal animal tank-like weapons are expanded upon, where you control them and get to see just how devastating of a weapon they each are. And although at first these sections can be a bit clunky, with a bit of practice and understanding, you'll be roasting tens of thousands of Ganon's minions in seconds. They are, after all, ancient, not fully understood technology, so they all weren't going to handle like a Porsche or anything. There is a tremendous amount of content to play through here, with some surprising additions that act as a love letter to anyone who enjoyed the world of Zelda Breath of the Wild. But there is also perhaps a very decisive creative decision that may be jarring to some, because what first acts as a straight prequel to Zelda Breath of the Wild becomes something very different around halfway through the game. I won't spoil anything here, but just know that the two games don't exactly fit snugly together with regards to its story. Age of Calamity offers a different narrative to what many were expecting, and although I would have preferred a straight prequel myself, with an ending that would make me want to play through Breath of the Wild again to set things right, instead we'll have to perhaps wait for Breath of the Wild 2 to truly understand exactly what the story is telling us. Those thinking this game was just filler for this sequel may want to play through Age of Calamity to make sure they don't miss something in the narrative. Along with the not so obvious story decision, the endgame content may suffer as a result of making the initial playthrough more packed, as when you finish the game you are presented with more levels to battle in and a large amount of challenges to overcome to unlock more characters and level up your favourites. But unlike the first Hyrule Warriors, there isn't a challenge map or anything to take these characters into battle, only rearrangements of the same levels you have already completed, which is an unfortunate trade-off. The final point I'd like to highlight is the split screen multiplayer mode, which is always a welcome addition to any game if you ask me. Thankfully you are able to play through the entire game in split screen mode except for the Divine Beast missions, which was kind of strange as I would have thought you could have, I don't know, controlled an extra turret or something. Co-op mode is a real blast, definitely helping alleviate any of the grinding and is awesome to experience with a friend. However, although there is an expected drop in performance from the single player, the frame rate takes a colossal hit in the endgame battles, to the point where it is even often impossible to time the game's required dodges to open up bosses, and this really can cripple the enjoyment factor because it is so bad. I do remember there being problems with the original Hyrule Warriors in the same areas, where they later patched to improve the performance, so I can only hope that they do the same here for those of you who are looking for an enjoyable co-op experience. But a side note, it only really gets bad towards the very end, with the majority of the game not having too much of a problem. All in all, Age of Calamity is an interesting hack and slash adventure for the Switch. They could have played it safe, but instead the dev team has decided to make a different feeling game to the last Hyrule Warriors, bringing it all in line with the world of Zelda Breath of the Wild. If, like me, you wished Breath of the Wild focused more on the rise of Calamity Ganon, you could have what you want in this game. But also know this, it's not as obvious as a journey as you may originally think, and its large amount of content may only be a draw for those who truly love the combat system of this kind of game. And if you do choose to pass on this game in favour of Breath of the Wild 2, there is a chance that you might be missing some of the story elements that will make Breath of the Wild 2 even better. Morgan Emily Jane says, I can't help but feel that Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity has simply been made to bridge the gap between Breath of the Wild and upcoming Breath of the Wild 2, and as such it just feels like this game will be overlooked in the long run. However, I really hope Breath of the Wild 2 brings some of these battle elements forward from Hyrule Warriors and that Zelda becomes a playable character in the mainline game. This game makes me optimistic for Breath of the Wild 2. Vagra says, giving it a hit but only barely. I understand it's a spin-off, but Dynasty Warriors is always a fun time, and I'm glad one of Breath of the Wild's weak points being the story has been worked on. Had it not, I would have said miss and might have forgot about it. John Patterson says, I'm having a great time with it, but it's a bit of a slow burn, whereas Hyrule Warriors 1 was balls to the wall crazy right out of the gate. James Christoph says, I'm enjoying it. Best Mosu I've played, plus Mithra and Urbosa are back. Did I pronounce all of that right? Jonathan Douglas says, nothing else to expect, it's Zelda. If you wanted something else, then you are a problem customer who won't read the tin. Kizra says, I haven't played much, but I already feel like it's not as good as the first one. I wouldn't compare it to Breath of the Wild, that's unfair. It's a different type of game. And finally Fanata says, as a Warriors pro gamer, Hyrule Warriors was my game of the year 2014. This one mechanically and contextually is kinda the best one. This game is pretty damn sick. Heavy hit over here. Although it's not the Breath of the Wild everyone loves, it still nails the vibe and sits at the top of the very tall Dynasty Warriors Schlock Hill. So with all of that said, adding up all the hits and the misses from the OLL gaming community, 83% would recommend you play Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Thank you for all those who left their comments on this week's game, and if you would like to be a part of the next gaming review here on Critical Hit, simply join the OLL Games Discord, Facebook, YouTube or Twitch channel and watch out for future review posts. This was Bill on behalf of OLL Games, and I will see you next time right here on Critical Hit.
9, 8, 7,